Hello, my name is Buddy Childress, and I'm Executive Director of Needles Eye Ministries. We are really happy to have you with us today for our monthly speaker series. We hope you enjoy it. A few of you who were here, or who were there at Innsbruck last week, would you raise your hands? Were you listening closely for the Hoboken accent today? It was not there. We had a conversation about that. Lise, you did a great job. She did. She introduced me last Thursday. She said with a word that I'm really not attracted to begin with, but everyone who heard her last Thursday introduce me got a quick lesson in diction, because from her perspective, the word boss is really a two-syllable word, boss. Now, you didn't hear it today, but we heard it last week, so thank you for thank you for that very kind introduction, Lisa. Went a little longer than normal, but no, not surprised. I really do appreciate you. Sweet words. And I really want to thank you all for coming out so early this morning. I first of all need to introduce two people here who are very close to me. Lisa mentioned my wife, Laura, and she is here. Where are you, honey? Just raise your hand. She's had, believe me, she's had one significant role in Needles Eye for a long time. And then my baby, my youngest, my daughter, Laura Carter. There she is. Would you raise your hand, sweetheart? Thank you all for being here. We have a special series of 16 speakers this year because it is our 35th year, and a lot of people go back to the 80s, the 90s. I'm one of the few that go back to the 70s. I actually spoke in the 70s, so my hair was a little gray, a little lighter, darker, and a little much thicker at that point in time. But I want to talk to you today primarily about my story, because all of our speakers this year are doing that, and most of them throughout the years do as well. But as I think about my story, one of the things I have thought about recently has been one of my favorite movies, City Slickers. How many of you saw City Slickers? Great. All right, now, the scene is Billy Crystal talking to his two friends who grew up, I think it was in Brooklyn, maybe the Bronx, one of the two. They were Yankees fans, which I have a hard time understanding as a Red Sox fan. But he said, you know, we were out in the streets, we were playing stickball. You remember that? He was talking to one of his friends. He said, we were playing stickball, and you would hit the ball in the middle of the street, and it would go high, and it would hit a high wire. And it stopped the game. And he looked at his friend, and he said, so what happened at that point in time? What did you get? Does anybody remember? What was the answer to that question? You got a do-over. Well, I want to talk to you today about do-overs, because in my life, that was extremely applicable and tremendously needed. I am a native Richmonder. I grew up, as the crow flies, not far, because it was across the river, which at that point in time you needed a passport to get over here, in a place called Westwood, and which is near where the Westwood Club is. Great place to grow up. It was developing at that point in time, because prior to World War II, it was a golf club, and they were making it into a settlement, a residential area. Kids were everywhere. It was a wonderful place. And as I was growing up in the 50s, my dad was a businessman. He was raised in Richmond, but he was raised in the Depression. He was one of those great generation people. And he was one of 10, fought in World War II, was poor as he grew up, and he made it through the Depression. And all of his life, really almost until the day he died, he was looking over his shoulder, because he never wanted to be poor again. And I remember that, and it made a tremendous impact on me, because as a business owner, and he started his business before the war, shut it down, went in the Navy, came back and started it again. He was in business for 40 years as an entrepreneur here in Richmond. Had a company called Childress Printing Company. He was concerned about not being poor. I remember times when he would come home for dinner and go back to work after dinner, and he would tell me on occasion, son, now I'll see you tomorrow, but you just remember, you're not going to have any needs. That's why I do this. Well, we were not rich, but we were comfortable. And really my greatest need as a kid growing up as an only child was his time, which I never got because it was just who he was. He was working hard because he was looking over his shoulder. So I finished high school. I went to Randolph-Macon. I had several colleges that were possibilities for me that were recruiting me to play basketball. And Paul Webb was the coach at Randolph-Macon at the time, and I thought a lot of him and ended up going there. And we had a really good ball club that I had to make that had no seniors on it. And I was excited about going to college. It was so, that phrase, wine, women, and song, and have a good time. That's what I thought about college. It really wasn't a whole lot about academics at the time. And so one of the things that was occurring at Randolph-Macon in the 60s was that they had this thing called first semester rush. And that was a killer because it was really exciting and a lot of fun to go to fraternity parties. And I remember Webb called me in his office one day about 30 days into the practice season. He said, "Buddy, you're going to have to give up either the fraternity or basketball. You're not going to be able to do both." Well, I had had a fairly good career in high school, and that never occurred to me. I just processed it in the right ear and out the left. And about another 30 or 45 days later, he called me in and he said, "You remember the conversation we had?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, I'm telling you now that you're going to have to leave because you're not making basketball a priority." Truly one of the greatest regrets of my life, not the greatest, but one of the greatest because it was indicative of incredible immaturity. But I stayed obviously was in school, in a fraternity life situation, and Laura and I ended up getting married. We met at the end of in my junior year, and we ended up getting married at the end of we met in our sophomore year, got married at the end of our junior year, and I am sure that is a significant reason why I finished on time, because I just wasn't studying. I mean, you do an all-nighter before an exam, and that's about all you did. So college ended, the Army started, I came back from the Army and went to work for Xerox. Now, my dad, because of his background, all that I had learned as a child was be successful, work hard, who do you know, where do you live, what do you drive, all of that. That was what was important to me. And I knew going through school that, when I got to be a dad, that was something that just is not who I wanted to be. But you become what has been modeled. And very quickly into my professional life, that was who I was. For me, an easy week was 60 hours. I went to work for a major corporation, and within 2.5 years, had been promoted 4 times. Was in a position before I left the corporation where there were 2 people reporting through me to Richmond. I was in an incredible situation in Charlottesville with the University of Virginia and a geographic territory that I was responsible for, 7 figures of revenue, and I was 25 years old. There were a lot of people who looked at my career and said, "This guy's got it made." Well, yes, perhaps in a professional sense, but they didn't go home with me at night. They did not know how my life was with regard to what was important in my life. You see, for that kind of a setting and coming out of the background that I had, what I had observed and had been modeled, to me, professional success was really all that it was about. And I was getting that, but much to the chagrin of my family. With that position and that responsibility at that young age, I handled it not well, but primarily I handled the pressure of that job with alcohol. I am convinced, had I remained in that setting another 5 years or so, I would have been an alcoholic. My drinks of choice at that point in time, handling that pressure, were scotch and water and double martinis. And I drank a number of those to handle the pressure, to do the work after work when I came home and finished dinner and went back to work. There were a lot of things in my life professionally that I was, and personally, that caused me a lot of guilt, a lot of remorse when I was alone with my thoughts and my work wasn't on the front page of my life. And the guilt that you have for things, the decisions that you make, personally and professionally, knowing that you're not living the way that you had been taught, they tend to sort of eat at you when you allow yourself to think about it, and that happened a lot to me. Handling that type of scenario when you are struggling to be successful, and that is really all that's important to you. You tend to sort of march to the beat of the drummer of the group that you think is the in group, whether it's your top executive group that you want entry to, closer friends who've done, or friends who have done better at what they do than you. So your ethics and your mindset become shaped by other people's opinion of what is correct and proper. So all of that was happening in my life, and then my dad had a heart attack. In the fall of, or in the winter of 1972, we moved back to Richmond, and I came here to help him in his company before, until he would get, hopefully, out of the hospital, which he did. That summer, my son was about 2.5 years old in the summer of 1973. And I had promised Laura that we would go back to church for him, not for me. I didn't need to do that. I already went on Christmas Eve and Easter, and it was really no reason to exaggerate anything. But as a kid, I grew up in the church. My father would, in that generation, when they say go to church, you went to church. And I did, but it made absolutely no impact. So in 1973, in the summer of 73, we went back to church for my son. And that Sunday, it was in the church where we were married and where Laura grew up. There was a new pastor who was preaching. I think it was his first sermon. And he was a very articulate guy, right out of seminary, went to Northwestern undergrad, Princeton Graduate School, seminary, very articulate, sharp dresser from Wisconsin, loved the Green Bay Packers. So for all the wrong reasons, I decided to listen to him. I think I had my day timer in my left pocket so that, if I got a little bit bored, I could do some work in the pew. He preached a message that, although I had been to church as a kid, I had never heard, really not here. And he talked about a personal God that loved me in spite of myself, that knew me at my core and would forgive me anyway. And I never heard that.